Rocky Sermon Series starts today. Rocky Sermon Series. Now, this is what I want to know. I went online, and I noticed that there was like a big uptick in Rocky viewers this last 2 weeks because of Christ Point Church. Christ Point Church, you know, they even put it on one of the stations at my house. I don't know what it is, but it's like a Rocky marathon all week long. I'm in like Rocky Christmas land for me, but hey, just want to start out and say, welcome home. Rocky won this week, ladies and gentlemen. I wish I had one of these things that would drop down from the ceiling with that one's all wired up. Let's do it this way. Ladies and gentlemen, see, is this cool or what? Because it comes down and you're always thinking, where does that come from? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Point. That's how they come in. They just allow me to introduce to you in this corner the individual who needs no introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, you. It's you. It's the one and the only you. There we are. We're introduced to our contender number one. It is you. Let me just break this down for you. His life was a 1 in a million shot. He grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, just another bum from the neighborhood. He spent his days as a strong arm for a shady loan shark. He spent his nights moonlighting as an amateur boxer. And his world had cracks running through it that he didn't know how to feel. His name was unknown, and his life was filled with gaps. In 1976, a movie was released with a simple one-word title, and that was Rocky. See, now I want you to picture with me a boxing ring. Now, have you ever just stopped, because I think this way, I think like weird. Have you ever stopped to think why it's called a ring if it's square? I went and researched that. It's because they used to have them just brawling, and people would gather in a circle and they fought with their fist. So they still call it a ring. Picture your life as a boxing ring. Picture our lives as a boxing ring. What we carry into our corner is who we really are. Now I want to get that into our heads. What we carry into that corner is who we really are. See, most of what I described there a minute ago, leading up to Rocky, most of that doesn't just fit Rocky's life. Most of that fits our lives. We're just another bum from the neighborhood a lot of times. You know what? Just another kid out of the ditch. Just somebody out, just some guy. Rocky, he's not so much different than me and you. He's not a whole lot different than you and I. I want to introduce to you Rocky Balboa. Let me say it this way, Rocky Balboa. I might go into that little bit as we go along. Rocky is a fictitious character, and he was created in the mind of Sylvester Stallone prior to 1976. So that's when the movie came out. Through cinema, he's just encouraged millions of people. His name's a household name. I mean, you just see that's just everybody knows who Rocky is. I want to introduce you to another Rock, though. He's a real person. He's created by the hands of God. And we can find him in Matthew chapter 4. We are introduced to him in Matthew chapter 4. Our first introduction into the world of Simon, the world called him Simon, his friends called him Simon, is in Matthew chapter 4. But Jesus, a little later on, found the need to call him Rock. Called him the Rock. Let's look at Matthew chapter 4, verse 18. This is when we're first introduced to this guy. While walking by the Sea of Galilee, Jesus saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, who is his brother, casting nets into the sea, for they were fishermen. Just another bum on the seashore. Just another ordinary guy on the seashore. See, Simon was from Galilee. He was a fisherman. How can this guy be the Rock? I mean, it's even in parentheses, who is called Peter. How can this guy be the Rock? His life was a 1,000,000 to 1 shot. This guy's life was a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. Let's look at Matthew again, but let's look at chapter 16 this time. Let's look at verses 13 through 19, and let's see this story. I preached this about 6-8 months ago, and it may be familiar to you. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, got an away game going on, in other words. Jesus is taking them out of their comfort zone, got an away game. He asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? You know, we're in a as Archie Bunker would say, we're in a corn country here. We're in a foreign country, in case you don't pick up on that. And they said, some say that you're John the Baptist. You know, who do these people say that I am? Some say that you're John the Baptist. There's one. Some say that you're Elijah. There's two. Some say Jeremiah, and some say prophets. Here's 4 things that they've attributed to him, and none of them are the Son of God. He said to them, but wait a minute, who do you say that I am? Now, I don't care what they say. I want to know what you say. Then my guy, my rock, my buddy, my impetuous, quick-speaking guy, Peter, jumps up and says, you are the Christ, you are the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven has. And I tell you this, you are Peter. I'm changing your name. I'm changing your identity right now. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell ain't going to prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Wow. I'm talking, we could preach like 9 sermons in a row on that verse right there. But here, let me just tell you how this goes. Simon Peter calls Jesus the Christ. Ain't nobody else doing that. Nobody else is saying, oh, well, some say you're prophet, some say John the Baptist. You know, we got 4 human attributes. Who do you say I am? You're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God. Peter calls Jesus the Christ. Jesus calls Simon the rock. Let me break this down for you. I think you already know it, but I'm going to break it down for you in case you don't. The Greek meaning of the word Peter is Petros, which comes, rock is Petros, which means Petra, which means comes the word Peter. So Peter literally means the rock. Jesus said, I'm not going to build my foundation of the ministry that I'm entrusting to you upon sand. I'm not going to build it upon something that's wishy-washy. I'm not going to build my relationship to lead others to Christ upon you sometimes showing up to church. Think about that one just a little bit. I'm going to build this up on the solid foundation, the rock of everything around, the hardest foundation I can find, the most firm foundation. That's you, Peter. I'm building my foundation of the ministry upon you. Now, let's look into our lives. Let's look through the gloves just a little bit. You know, because when I was a kid, we'd box a little bit. I don't remember winning any. But I just remember boxing around a little bit. You know, I win when I was like little guys. You know, pow. Bring on another one. Bring another one on. You know, when the big guy come, you know, and I got beat. So let's look into our lives. Let's look through the gloves. Let's look at our 2 rocks. Let's look at them real quick. See, the hard truth is every life that's listening today, every life that's viewing today, every life that's in service today, every life has cracks running through it. I don't care who you are. You could say, no, I don't. Yes, you do. Every life in this house, every life in the listening audience, every life in the viewing audience has cracks running through it. Rocky called them gaps. I just want to break down Rocky, not Peter the Rock, but Rocky Balboa called those things gaps. And this is how this story plays out. You may have not paid much attention to it, but in Rocky number 1, 1976, Rocky meets Adrian. He meets Adrian, and you know, wow. You know, I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, but he meets Adrian, and Adrian's got a brother named Paulie, the guy that smokes cigars and is rude to everybody. He don't sweat nobody, I'll sweat you. So he's working in the meat plant. Rocky's in there punching meat. And Paulie goes like this, what's the story, Rock? What's happening with you and my sister. What's that? You really like her? And Rocky says, sure I like her. Sure I like her. He says, Paulie says, I don't see it. What's the attraction? And Rocky says, I don't know. Fill gaps, I guess. Rocky says, I don't know. I guess we fill gaps. Paulie says, I don't know what gaps you're talking about. And Rocky says, I don't know. He says, I don't know. She got gaps. I got gaps. And together we fill gaps. Man, I'm going to tell you something. That's good stuff. She got gaps. I got gaps. And together we fill gaps. I'm going to tell you something. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but we all have gaps. We all have gaps. John Maxwell calls them blind spots. We all have gaps. Rocky had two great gaps running through his life. He had two great gaps running through his life. Number one is where we're introduced to Adrian. Yo, Adrian. We're introduced to Adrian. Now, I'm going to tell you something. When we're first introduced to her, she's pitiful. She's pitiful. She's beat down by her brother and society. She's got no self-esteem, no self-worth. She won't even look somebody now. And Rocky says, you know, it's when you this little girl that she suffered from a disease of shyness, he says. You know, she can't even look somebody in the eye. She can't even make eye contact. And I am amazed at what Hollywood can do. They took a beautiful woman and made her look the most pitiful thing I have ever seen. There, you know, when I was a kid watching Rocky for the first time, there wasn't a whole lot I'm thinking, well, I don't get it. I don't get it. She ain't nothing to look at. So, you know, they took a beautiful woman and they made her look bad in front of the whole world. So I'm going to tell you something. That's what the world will do to you and me if we're not careful. It'll take us and it'll get our heads down. It'll beat us down, and it will do it in front of the whole world and not care a bit about it. If we're not careful, if we don't watch who we're focusing on, then this is what the world will do. The world will tell you and will tell me, you're ugly. You're useless. See, the world will take our gaps, and it'll open them up, and it'll expose our weaknesses, and it'll leave us bleeding and just run right off and laugh at us. See, who are we going to let in? Who are we going to let in? Together, we fill gaps. This is marriage 101 right here. This is, if you want the secret to a successful marriage, fill gaps. If you want to say, you know what, I do some marriage stuff once in a while on those premarital counseling, you know, and I just tell them, look, it ain't going to be perfect at this table. You're going to have to work on this. You're going to find, you can't get every problem and you can't make him perfect and he can't make her perfect at that table in there in that office. You got to get out and fill gaps. That's just how it works. See, this is the recipe for relationships. And you say, well, I don't know if I agree with that. Well, I'm going to tell you, if you don't give a little bit, then you're not going to have a relationship. That's just how it works. If it's all about me, then the relationship's not going to work. See, we got to help someone fill gaps in their lives. That's our role, is to help someone fill gaps in our lives. Last night in Smithville, wow. You know what? I saw gaps being filled. I saw gaps being filled. I saw people coming in and saying, I got all these children right here. You know what? Is it all right if they can eat anything they want? They can play outside. It's 12 degrees. Let them do it. Not one kid complained. Didn't hear a first kid complain. Half of them walking around with no shoes on. And I'm thinking, hey, kids don't care. They just want to play and have fun. You know what? We came in and we loved on people. Not one sermon was preached. Not one person felt condemned. And you know what? There was some people there that was from a next transition step. In other words, they were transitioning back into society from jail. And they were there. You know what? Nobody was pointing fingers. Nobody's just loving on them. They had gaps, and we had gaps. So don't think that you're the only one that has gaps. We fill gaps, and they fill gaps. You know, and there's a friend of ours down there that came to the Lord about 4 weeks ago, and I said, you realize what kind of revival you brought us? You filled gaps in our lives. See, the other great gap that Rocky needed filled in his life, he needed a manager Man, he needed a manager. He needed someone to see in him what he couldn't see in himself. You know, why do people have coaches? Because you can't see if your swing's working right or not from your angle. Somebody else I'm going to tell you, you go golfing with Rick, Rick's going to tell you, Steve, Pastor, you looked up. Thanks a lot, Rick. You go with Rick, you go with Ronnie, hey, you looked up. Okay, thanks a lot. In other words, every time I swing the club, I look up apparently because it don't go where I want it to. So, but the thing is, somebody over here, a manager, can see what Rocky couldn't see. Rock could punch, but he needed Mickey to teach him how to fight. He knew how to throw a punch and to swing, but he didn't know how to win. Without Mick, he was just another bum from the neighborhood. That's all he was. See, and there's a man named Jesus that comes into the picture. This man named Jesus can manage our lives better than we could ever imagine. He sees what we can't see. I can promise you, he sees what we can't see, and he sees in each and every one of us what we can't see in ourselves. And here's what we will do. Our lives will come into alignment and in better peace with the God-intended life when we let God kind of coach us. When we let God into our lives. Now, see, let's look at these two rocks. Let's look at these guys through the gloves. Key point number one, you didn't think just because we went into Rocky we was going to leave out key points, did you? Key point number one. For those of you visiting, I love key points. If I had a list of key points would be my number one key points. So, I love key points. Key point number one, Jesus overcomes fear. Jesus overcomes fear. See, it don't matter whether we're stepping out of a perfectly good boat, like Peter did. You know, it's like people say, go skydiving. I don't see the need to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. You know, I'm kind of thinking the word says that the waves were forcing against the boat. You know, the winds was up, the sea was raging, and Peter stepped out of a perfectly good boat. Jesus overcomes fear, whether it be stepping out of a perfectly good boat onto a raging sea or stepping into the ring with a heavyweight champion of the world with 5 weeks to get ready. See, Jesus overcomes fear. In Matthew chapter 14, Jesus walks on the water. They're out in the water. He walks on, and it's a little bit raging. It's a little bit tumultuous. And Peter steps out after him. I'm coming in, Lord. We talked about this the other day with some friends. People say, Peter took his eyes off the Lord and he failed. He got out of the boat, didn't he? And I don't see anybody else in that boat that got out. He got out and he walked for a little while. He did the 1 in a million. Jesus walks on water. Peter comes out to him. Verse 26, and they thought Jesus was a ghost. And they cried out in fear. My Bible says they cried out in fear. You don't cry out in safety. You don't cry out in security. You cry out in fear. And when you cry out, you're really afraid. See, Rocky stepped past his fear, and he stepped into 1,000,000 to 1 shot when he stepped into that ring. It's 1,000,000 to 1 shot. I'm stepping into that ring. Peter stepped over his fear. Peter stepped right over his fear. Stepped onto the 1 in a million opportunity to step on the water and walk like Jesus walked. Step in his footsteps. A 1 in a million shot to walk on water. Fear is the chains that will keep us from stepping into or onto our 1,000,000 to 1 dream. Fear's the chain that holds us down and won't let us step into what God's called us to do. Fear won't let us because it never makes sense. In faith never makes sense. Fear says, I might lose. Yeah, but faith says you might win. You know, when the promoter says, Rocky, I don't think you understand. Rocky thought he was going to see about getting a job sparring with the champion while he was in Philadelphia. He says, I want you to know I'll be a good sparring partner. I won't tell you cheap shots. And he says, you don't understand, Rocky. I'm giving you the opportunity to fight Apollo Creed for the World Heavyweight Championship of the world. What do you think? No. It's afraid. No, I know. No, You know, in other words, fear says I can't do it. Fear says I might lose. Fear says I might get beat up and killed. Fear says it won't work. Faith says, yeah, but what if it does? What if it does? Let's go for it. 1 John 4:18 says, perfect love drives out fear. Perfect love drives out fear. Part B in that says fear has to do with punishment. That's what my version says. Fear has to do with punishment. So let me kind of break that down. I'm afraid to give my heart to the Lord because I'm afraid of the punishment. What do you mean by punishment? People say, yeah, I'm afraid to. The punishment is I don't know how to act. I don't know what my friends are going to say. I don't know what kind of hit my pride is going to take. Punishment is consequences for our actions. So we fear punishment. We fear consequences. And I'll give you an example. There's a little white Kia with a red top on it. Drives around about 90 miles an hour. And when that person, I'm not saying if it's a woman or a man, but when she gets pulled over, she is in fear. She's fearing the consequences. So then she goes and breaks her glass box of emergency prayers and says, Lord, you got to get me out of this. So, see, you know, sometimes it's like God says, I didn't tell you to drive fast. Won't you drive a little slower? See, fear is, when we fear the punishment. We fear the consequences. I fear losing my riotous living like that prodigal son. I fear if I come to the Lord, I'm going to lose my good times. Well, I got news for you. This is as real as it gets. You're going to lose that. I promise you're going to lose it. Whether you come to the Lord or whether you don't, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose it when you die. You're going to lose it when you get tired of it. I'll never get tired of partying. Yeah, you will. Yeah, you will. I'll never get, you'll get tired when the money runs out. Money won't run out. Yeah, it will. You're going to lose that when you meet that right person who fills gaps. And then all of a sudden, you don't want that world anymore. When we meet the right person who fills gaps in our lives, I met the right person who fills gaps in my lives almost 33 years ago. We're still filling gaps. You know what? I met the Lord a few years after that. We're still filling gaps. We're still working on it. But part C says, whoever fears has not been perfected in love. In other words, whoever does not view through the eyes of salvation. In other words, we don't want to see every situation through Jesus. We want to look around. Okay, I'm going to look around. Ooh, I don't know if I like that or not. But when we see it through Jesus, through the eyes of grace, it just looks different. Love has been perfected. Key point number 2, Jesus forgives unfaithfulness and he restores broken relationships. Jesus forgives unfaithfulness and he restores broken relationships. There's a small part in Rocky where he's mad about his locker being given away. He's mad that his stuff's been bagged and hung on a hook in the locker room. After 6 years, Rocky's upset and he has a public separation from Mickey in the boxing club right there. He has a public separation. There's a small part in Peter's life where he has this public separation from Jesus. It's the night before Jesus is to be crucified. He's being pretty much tried, beaten, and everything else. And he denies Jesus in John chapter 18 3 times. He has this public separation. But Pastor, you don't understand. I burned my bridges. I burned my bridges. Well, so did Peter. He burned them pretty good. I'm a failure. You don't understand? I am a failure. You know what? So was Peter. But you don't understand. I turned my back on Jesus. I even blamed him for the things in my life that went wrong. He doesn't want me back. So did Peter. I'm just going to tell you, you can't one-up Peter. You can't one-up the rock. I've done worse than Peter's ever done. You don't understand, Pastor. I've done worse than Peter's ever done. No, you haven't. No, you have not. Mark chapter 16, verse 7 kind of lays it out like this. It's after the resurrection. It's after Peter's betrayal. It's after Peter said, I can't do this. Peter said in a roundabout way, I can't do this. After giving up, Jesus comes back, resurrects from the dead, tells the angel to tell them, you tell the disciples to come see me here. Make sure you tell Peter. Make sure you tell Peter. Peter had disqualified himself. How many times do we disqualify ourselves? That's exactly what the devil wants you to do. He wants you to sit in that chair just like Rocky did when the promoter is saying, I'm giving you 1,000,000 to 1 shot. No, I can't do it. I can't. He's the champion of the world. You know, I'm giving you 1,000,000 to 1 shot, Rocky. Take it. Peter disqualified himself. We do this every day. Jesus makes a point to instruct him and to make sure Peter is restored. Peter just had some gaps. Peter just had some gaps. Jesus filled those gaps by bringing him home. Jesus filled gaps by bringing Peter home. You know what? Jesus didn't come back from the dead with the keys of hell and victory in his hand and say, I need all y'all to come and share this victory with me, but you can't come, Peter, because you've been a bad boy. No, it don't work that way. Make sure you tell Peter, because you know what? I ain't holding him accountable for that. Make sure you tell Peter, he's my boy. Get him over here. Key point number 3. Jesus is a patient teacher. Peter corrected Jesus. Peter even corrected Jesus. Jesus taught him patiently. Peter rebuked Jesus. Jesus taught and restored him patiently. Peter defended Jesus violently. Jesus taught him to patiently love. Rocky found the will to win through the patient teaching of his manager. The master is always looking for students willing to learn. Always. Key point number 4. Jesus sees us as he intends us to be. Jesus sees us as he intends us to be. Jesus saw an uneducated, gruff, vile fisherman, and he called that guy the rock of my ministry. Hey guys, you were doing this, and you stopped on us, and you watched us, and I appreciate it. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending some time with us. I pray that you enjoyed the service today. Let me take this opportunity to invite you out personally. We're located on the square in Sparta. Our service times are at 9 and 11 every Sunday morning. We'll meet you at the door with a hug. We'll meet you at the door with some coffee ready and some donuts if you want. And let me just take a real quick minute to invite you over to our Smithville campus. For those of you who can't drive over to Sparta, drive over to Smithville, 11 o'clock for now, at 614 Murphy Street in Smithville, Tennessee. So one of our campuses, Christ Point Church, we're real people, we're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. Welcome home.